You tore your ACL and then you tore it again. If that's you, I need you to stay with me for the next hour, because what I'm about to share with you is everything I wish someone had told me when I was sitting on that physio table hearing those words for the second time. Let me tell you what that moment feels like. Not the physical pain, the other kind. The kind where you're lying on the grass and you already know. Before the scan, before the surgeon, before anyone says a word, you already know. And the first thought isn't even about the knee. It's not again, why me, how long this time? And then the fear sets in, the real fear. Not of the surgery, not of the rehab, but of the question you're scared to ask out loud. What if I never get back to where I was? I know that fear. I lived it. And if you're watching this right now, whether you just got the diagnosis, whether you're 6 months post-op and still not feeling right, whether you've already been through this once and you're facing it again, I want you to know something. That fear is not weakness. That fear is what happens when sport is not just something what you do, but who you are. But here is what makes it worse. It's not just the injury, it's what happens after. You go to your physio, you sit in the waiting room, you get called in and you share that appointment with 2 other patients. You get 15 minutes, maybe 20 if you're lucky, and you leave with a sheet of exercises. Some band work, some cycling, maybe a little bit of electrical stimulation on the quad, and the instruction: rest, take it easy, we will see you in 6 weeks. And you do it because you trust the process, because they are the professional. Because what else are you supposed to do? 6 weeks pass, you go back, they say you're progressing well, a few more weeks, a bit more cycling, maybe some light jogging now, and then one day they tell you you're cleared. You can return to sport. So you do. And somewhere in that first session back, on the pitch, in the gym, in the training, something doesn't feel right. The knee doesn't feel like your knee anymore. It feels fragile. It feels like something you have to protect instead of something you can trust. And nobody told you that was going to happen. Nobody prepared you for it. Or worse, you go back and it happens again. Because here is what every ACL patient actually wants. Not just to be pain-free, not just to walk without a limp. They want to trust their knee again. They want to plant their foot and cut without that half second of hesitation. They want to sprint full speed. They want to go into a tackle, jump for a header, land from a box and feel nothing but the game. They want to feel like an athlete again, not a patient, not a liability, not someone who has to be careful, an athlete. And they want someone to tell them with honesty, with evidence, with a real plan, exactly how to get there. Not a generic protocol, not a calendar that says cleared at 9 months, not a sheet of band exercises and a pat on your back, a real roadmap built for athletes, delivered by someone who has been through it twice. This is what this video is about. I will walk you through the exact recovery framework, the one I built after my back-to-back ACL tears, the same framework I've now used to help over 10,000 people recover and return to sport. Not in theory, in practice. Phase by phase, block by block, with the criteria that actually matter, not the calendar that doesn't. By the end of the video, you will know exactly what to do, exactly when to do it, and exactly what your knee needs to earn before you take the next step. No guessing, no generic advice, no rest and wait, just a real plan. But before I give you the roadmap, I need to tell you how I found it. Because the reason this framework exists is not because I read it in a textbook, it's because I lived that version that failed twice. I was 5 years old when I first kicked a football, and from that moment it was everything. Growing up in Belgium, football wasn't just a hobby, it was identity. It was the first thing I thought about in the morning and the last thing I thought about at night. By the time I was a teenager, I was competing at a high level, training hard, living for it. And then at 16 years old, it happened. I was in a game, normal challenge, nothing crazy, and I felt it. That pop, that immediate wrongness, that moment where your body tells you before your brain catches up, something just changed. ACL tear, surgery scheduled, 6 weeks in a cast that covered almost my entire leg. When they took the cast off, I looked at my leg in the mirror and I was in shock. 6 to 8 weeks of no movement, of complete inactivity, and the muscle was just gone. My right leg was twice the size of my left. I remember standing there and thinking, is this really my leg? So I started rehab. Just at a local physio clinic. Shared appointment, electrical stimulation, ice, massage, rest, some stability work, standing on a Bosu ball, a bit of cycling, eventually some light running. And 6 months later, they cleared me. You're good to go. That's what they told me. So I went back. First game, same leg, same pop. I cannot fully describe to you what it feels like to hear that same diagnosis a second time. Because the first time you're scared, but the second time you're just broken. Not just physically, something deeper than that. Because now it's not just an injury, now it's a pattern. Now the question isn't when will I recover, it's will I ever actually recover? And the worst part, nobody could ever explain to me why it happened. Nobody sat me down and said, here is what we missed, here is what your knee wasn't ready for, here is what we should have done differently. They just told me these things happen, let's just start again. I refused to accept that. I was 16 years old and I refused to accept that this was just bad luck. So I started studying. My oldest brother was in physiotherapy school at that time. He had the textbooks, the resources, and I started studying at 16 years old. Knee mechanics, quad inhibition, progressive loading, graft maturation, return to sport criteria. And the more I read, the more I understood why things went wrong. My rehab had been passive. It had been generic. It had been built around time, not around what my knee actually could do. Nobody had tested my quad strength. Nobody had checked my limb symmetry. Nobody had asked, is this knee actually ready for the demands of sports yet? They had just looked at the calendar, 6 months, close enough, just go. So I rebuilt myself from scratch, this time with a real plan. Progressive strength training, structured loading, criteria-based progression. I didn't move to the next phase until my knee had earned it. Not until 6 weeks had passed. Not until the surgeon said so. Until the knee said so. I came back stronger than I was before my first injury. I returned to football, and I've played without a major injury since. But more importantly, as teammates and athletes around me started asking me how I managed my recovery, I started helping them. One athlete, then 5, then 20, and then I realized the problem I had experienced wasn't unique to me. It was everywhere. Athletes all over the world experiencing the same passive rehab, the same generic protocols, the same premature return to sports, and paying for it. That was the beginning of ACE Performance. 10 years later, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I've helped over 10,000 people gain clarity and recover from any type of knee injury. And the framework I'm going to share with you today is the direct result of everything I've learned from my own failures, from my research, and from working with thousands of athletes at every stage of this journey. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you this so you understand I have been exactly where you are. I know what it feels like to be cleared too early. I know what it feels like to go back and have it happen again. And I know what it takes to actually come back. Not just to walk without pain, but to play again. This is what this framework is built for. Let's start with the education, because before I give you the exercises, I need to change the way you think about recovery. Let me ask you something. When you think about recovering from an ACL tear, what number comes to mind? For most people, it's 9 months. Maybe 12. 9 months and you're cleared. That number is everywhere. Your surgeon says it, your physio says it, the internet says it, and I understand why. It gives people something to hold on to, a finish line, a date on the calendar to work towards. But here's the problem. That number, 9 months, has almost nothing to do with whether your knee is actually ready. Research tells us that athletes who return to sports before 9 to 12 months have a significantly higher risk of re-injury. But what the research also tells us, and what almost nobody talks about, is that time alone is not a sufficient criteria for return to sport. You can be 12 months post-operation with a quad that's still 40% weaker than the other side. You can be 9 months out and still compensating in every single movement without even knowing it. The calendar doesn't measure any of that. The calendar just counts days, and days don't build knees. Training does. This is the single most important mental shift I want you to make today. Write it down if you need to. Criteria based, not calendar based. What does that mean in practice? It means you don't move on to the next phase of recovery because a certain number of weeks have passed. You move on because your knee has demonstrated objectively that it is ready for the next demand. Think about it this way. If I asked you to run a marathon and your preparation was I've been alive for 35 years, that's long enough. You're ready. You would think I was insane because time alive doesn't prepare you for a marathon. Training does. Specific, progressive, measurable training. ACL recovery is exactly the same. Time post-surgery doesn't prepare your knee for your return to sport. Structured, progressive, criteria-based training does. So why does the system keep producing the same results? Why do we keep seeing athletes return to sports underprepared? There are three main reasons. Reason number one, passive rehab dominates the early stages. Ice, electrical stimulation, massages, these things have their place, but they are not rehabilitation. They are symptom management. They reduce pain and swelling, which is useful, but they do nothing to rebuild the strength, the neural drive, the movement capacity that your knee actually needs. The quad shuts down after ACL surgery. This is called arthrogenic muscle inhibition. It starts within hours of the operation. Every day you spend doing passive treatment instead of actively reconnecting your quad is a day that neural pathway gets quieter. And a quiet quad is a vulnerable knee. Reason number two, generic protocols with no progression criteria. Most rehab programs are built around time. Week 1, do these exercises. Week 4, add these. Week 12, start jogging, but there is no gate. There is no checkpoint that says, before you move forward, prove your knee can handle it. So athletes move through phases not because they're ready, but because the calendar says it's time. Reason number 3. Rehab stops too early. This is the one that causes re-tears. Most traditional rehab programs gets the athletes to the point they can jog, maybe do some light agility work, and then they call it done. But jogging is not sport. Jogging is a straight line at low speed. Sports is a 90-degree cut at full speed. Sports is a deceleration from a sprint. Sports is a planned and reverse in under a second. None of that is tested. None of that is trained. And then we wonder why 1 in 4 athletes under 25 who return to high-risk sports tear their ACL again. It's not bad luck. It's incomplete preparation. So what does complete preparation look like? This is the framework. 5 phases, each one building on the last, each one governed by criteria, not a calendar. Phase 0, prehab. This is the phase nobody talks about, the phase before surgery. The research is clear. The state of your knee on the day of the surgery predicts the state of your knee 12 months later. A stronger quad going in means a stronger quad going out. Every rep you do before surgery is a rep you don't have to catch up on later. Phase 1, rewiring. The first phase after surgery. 3 blocks. The goal is not strength yet. The goal is reconnection. Waking the quad back up, restoring extension, controlling swelling, building the neural foundation that every later phase sits on. Phase 2, building. This is where the knee gets built. Real bilateral and unilateral strength work, closing the limb symmetry gap, teaching the quad, hamstring, and calf to fire together under load. This is the phase most people rush, and rushing it is exactly how you end up back to square one. Phase 3, running. The phase where the knee learns to run. Not where you're given permission to jog, where the knee earns the right to run by demonstrating it can absorb force, produce force, and sustain repeated impact without swelling, without compensation, without breaking down. Phase 4, return to sports. The final phase. 4 blocks, each one adding a new physical demand. Change of direction, sprinting, 180 degrees shuttles, and finally, a formal return to sports testing battery that measures quad symmetry, hamstring to quad ratio, hop performance, dynamic balance, and psychological readiness. You don't pass with good enough. You pass with numbers that say, this knee is ready for the worst moment of the match. There are 3 rules that apply to every single session across every single phase. These are non-negotiable. Rule number 1. Pain stays at 3 out of 10 or below, not 0, 3 or below. Some discomfort during rehabilitation is normal, but if pain climbs above 3, you reduce load. If pain climbs above 5, you stop the exercise. If it's sharp or catching, you stop immediately. And pain must return to baseline within 2 hours of finishing a session. If it doesn't, that session was too much. Rule number 2. Swelling is the judge, not how the knee feels during the session, how it looks the next morning. If you wake up and the knee is puffy, the previous session was too aggressive. You cannot outrun swelling with optimism. Swelling means the knee is telling you something, and you listen. Rule number 3, every 4th week is a deload. Not because you're tired, because proactive recovery is how you avoid the flare before the flare even finds you. Same exercises, same intensity, 40 to 50% less volume. 1 week, then back to full load. The athletes who deload consistently progress. The athletes who skip it start over. We've gone through the mental model, why the current system still fails, and now you understand criteria-based progressions and the 3 rules you need to stick by. Now I need to talk to you about something that I rarely see being addressed in the world of ACL rehab, the psychological side. Because you can have the perfect protocol, you can do every exercise correctly, you can hit every criteria, and still, when you step back onto that pitch, something holds you back. That is not a physical problem. That is a real, documented, measurable barrier to return to sport, and it deserves its own conversation. There is a statistic I want to share with you. After ACL reconstruction, only 55% of athletes return to competitive sport. Let that land for a second. Nearly half of all athletes who go through surgery, who do the rehab, who get cleared, never actually go back. And when researchers looked at why, the physical side only told one part of the story. The other part? Fear. Fear of re-injury. Fear of that moment, the plant, the cut, the challenge where the body hesitates because the mind hasn't caught up yet. This is not weakness. This is not a mental health problem. This is a completely normal, completely documented response to a traumatic physical event. Your nervous system experienced something catastrophic and it remembers. Let me describe it. You've done the work, months of training, every phase completed, every criteria hit. You're physically ready, and then you step back on the pitch for the first time and someone runs at you. And for a fraction of a second, before your brain can stop it, your body flinches, your knee braces, your movement changes. Not because the knee isn't strong enough, because the mind isn't sure yet. That hesitation, that half second of doubt, is one of the most underestimated risk factors for re-injury. Because compensated movements under high-speed sport demands is very dangerous. Not because you're weak, because you're protecting something that doesn't need protection anymore. For those of you who have torn it twice, this section is for you specifically. Because the second ACL tier doesn't just set back the physical recovery, it attacks your identity. The first tier, you grieve the season. The second tier, you start to grieve the sport. You start asking questions you never asked the first time. Is my body just not built for this? Am I always going to be one challenge from this happening again? Is it even worth it to go back? I asked every single one of those questions, lying on that physio table after the second diagnosis. And I want to be honest with you. There was a period where I didn't know the answer. What pulled me through wasn't just training, it was understanding. Understanding exactly what had gone wrong. Understanding that the second tier was not inevitable. It was the result of a system that sent me back underprepared. And that understanding changed everything because it meant it was fixable. So what do you do with this? 3 things. First, measure it. There is a validated psychological assessment called the ACL RSI, ACL Return to Sports After Injury Scale. It measures your psychological readiness to return to sports. It asks about fear of re-injury, confidence in your knee, and your emotional response to the recovery process. A score below 56 is a significant predictor that you're not mentally ready, regardless of your physical numbers. This should be measured at the beginning of your recovery and again before return returning to sports. If the score is low, that is not a reason to stop, it's a reason to address it as seriously as you address quad strength. Secondly, use graded exposure. The way you rebuild confidence in a knee is the same way you rebuild strength in a knee, progressively. You don't go from physio table to full contact training. You earn each level of demand. Controlled change of direction, then reactive change of direction, then contact situations, then full training. Each successful rep is a message to your nervous system. This is safe. I can trust this. I'm not broken. Then lastly, reframe what recovery means. Recovery is not returning to the person you were before injury. Recovery is building a version of yourself that is stronger, more resilient, and more prepared than the athlete who got injured in the first place. That is not a motivational poster line. That is a physical reality if you follow the right process. The athletes I've worked with that came back from back-to-back tears and returned to sports, almost all of them say the same thing. I trust my knee more now than before I even got injured. And that is the goal, not just physical clearance, full trust. I want to be honest with you about something before we close. Following this framework is not easy. It requires patience in a process that feels slow. It requires honesty about what your knee can and cannot do. It requires the discipline to deload even when you think you don't need it, to repeat a block when the criteria aren't met yet, to trust the process even when the calendar is telling you you should be further along. But I promise you this, the athletes who follow this process, who earn every phase, who don't skip the gates, who treat criteria as non-negotiable, they come back fully, completely, with a knee they trust more than they ever did before the injury. And that is exactly what I want for you. I want to take you back to something. That 16-year-old kid standing in front of a mirror, looking at his leg and thinking, this is not mine. Twice, I want to tell you what that kid didn't know at that moment. He didn't know the injury was going to become the direction. He didn't know that the frustration, the anger at the system that failed him was going to become the fuel for everything that followed. He didn't know that 10 years later, he would be sitting here talking to thousands of people going through the exact same thing. And he definitely didn't know that the knee he thought that was broken was going to become the strongest part of his body, not just physically, in every way that matters. The day I stepped back on a football pitch after my second ACL tear, I want to tell you what that felt like, because it wasn't what I expected. I expected relief. I expected joy. I expected this overwhelming sense of I'm actually back. And those things were there. But what I didn't expect, what caught me completely off guard, was the trust. I planted my foot to make a run and nothing happened. No hesitation, no flinch, no half second of doubt, just movement. Clean, automatic, unthinking movement. The way it felt before any of this started. That moment, that single moment of complete trust was worth every session, every deload week, every block I had to repeat, every time I had to be honest that the criteria weren't met and I wasn't ready yet to progress. It was worth all of it. I started ACE Performance because of one belief. One simple, non-negotiable belief. No athlete should return to sports underprepared. Not because of a system that doesn't have the time for them. Not because a protocol was built around a calendar instead of a knee. Not because nobody told them what the research was saying for decades. You deserve better than that. Every athlete going through this deserves a better plan. A structured, progressive, criteria-based plan that prepares them not just to walk without pain, but to play, sprint, to cut, to compete, and to trust their knee completely. This is what this framework is. This is what this video has been. And I hope, genuinely hope, that somewhere in this video, something shifted inside of you. A belief about what recovery looks like. An understanding of what your knee actually needs. A sense that this is not just possible, it is achievable. With the right process, with the right patience, with the right plan. I also want to be honest with you about something. Watching this video is not the same thing as having a plan. Understanding the phases is not the same thing as executing them. And knowing what criteria-based progression means is not the same as having someone holding you accountable to it. Especially when the calendar is telling you to move faster than you should. You have the framework now, but the gap between knowing and doing is where most recoveries fall apart. That's what the ACL protocol is for. A step-by-step 36-week program built around everything you heard today. So you don't have to figure out what comes next on your own. The link is below. But whether you use it or not, you have everything you need to start making better decisions about your recovery today. So come back to this video if you need to. Use it. I want to leave you with one last thing. The second tier, the one that broke me, was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because pain is good, not because setbacks are gifts, but because it forced me to understand this process at a level I would never have reached if the first rehab had worked. And that understanding has now reached over 10,000 of people. People who came back. Athletes who came back, athletes who trusted their knee again, parents able to play with their kids again, stronger and more resilient than before the injury. This is the only thing I want you to take from this video. Not the faces, not the criteria, not the exercises. This. Your injury is not the end of your story. It's the part of the story that makes everything after it mean something. Do the work, trust the process, earn every phase, and I will see you on the other side.